up here not because I'm an expert. I'm up here because women's health is extremely important to me, as I'm sure it's important to all of you because we're women. There aren't enough resources going towards our healthcare. There's this huge vacuum of information we don't know about, and really everybody's just finding out about it. So in my work, I'm a visibility strategist for women like these women. I like to get around women who are in women's wellness and do my best to promote the, wow, this is like a miracle. I was like, oh, thank you. Would you mind asking me also if they have a mic? Yes, we're so sorry. Thank you.
International
You're the best. So while we're waiting on the mic, I'm just gonna go through and we'll introduce everybody. So we'll start with Leslie and we'll just go right down.
Hi, Leslie Darling. I mentioned it a little bit before, but I'm a menopause coach. And really my goal with what I do is educating women and just giving them kind of the pillars that help support that lifestyle shift, that help you get through a lot of things. There's a woman in the audience who I coach personally, but it's really just my passion to get out there and get this information that you just saw to as many women as possible and give them, like, beyond that, like that movie was pretty intense, but what can you do to kind of do the things to support the hormones, do the things that you can shift, because there is a shift during this time. So that's who I am, that's what I do.
Where are you employed?
I work, well, virtually, basically. I mean, I'm in Lambertville. We also have a house here part-time, but honestly,
So
I do it all over.
I'd have to seek you out.
Yeah, and I'll leave my card and my information and stuff, but yeah, you can sign up for stuff, but it's really just to educate women, so absolutely.
Okay, also, we did hand out some programs in the beginning, so if you have one, all of their contact information is on that. Okay, Sharie?
Yes, hello, I'm Sharie Hiller. Some of you know me very intimately. I'm a local gynecologist here in Cape May and Atlantic County for the past 25 years. So I'm literally in the process of leaving the mainstream medicine, and that's a whole discussion, and moving into my own practice and also doing menopause consultations, hormone therapy, and all gut health programs and things that support the perimenopause and menopausal time. I'll be doing some community work in the next several months. You'll be hearing a lot about it through the social media information that's there. I've got a retreat planned in the spring. If any of you were at the retreat, it stands for Lots Property in September. We'll be doing another one. That was a big success. We had a lot of women there that just put out their hearts for the day and enjoyed the beautiful weather and the beautiful property. And we had a few speakers on women's health issues. So lots of information coming. I'm starting a YouTube channel, and I am so passionate about women's health. And you know, eventually out of the conversation, I'm sure a lot of questions will be generated about really, I've obviously been doing this a long time, and I was, you know, in the forefront of prescribing hormones before it was even allowed in my practice. It was very underground. So some of you that have been with me a long time really know that I have gone out of the box quite a bit, and it's shocking to me to be ending my career and be able to see this movement and this energy and this empowerment of women. It's like, you know, when you start something out, you know, as a young 20-something-year-old as your career, and your whole career has really been about empowering women, and to see it coming back around again, it's a beautiful thing for me. I'm glad you're all here.
My name is Erin Farmer, and I am based out of Philly. I am a pelvic floor physical therapist, and my kind of bent is that I owned a CrossFit gym, the first one in Center City, Philly, for a decade, and then sold that to go to PT school because I couldn't get over trying to tinker with making people feel better. Empowerment of women has been something that's kind of been an ongoing theme in my life, and even coming out of PT school, just emerging into practice, basically, I just found myself seeing more of a deficit for women in the way that we care for them in typical healthcare models. So I am in private practice in Philly. I'm based out of a CrossFit gym there, but you can also find me online. I talk a lot about pelvic floor therapy. I talk a lot about strength training. I'm sure we're gonna get into this a little bit, but just like all of these amazing people, I'm a big advocate for healthcare coming alongside women and doing more to educate us. But I also feel like there's a lot we don't know how to do because we were never taught. We were never taught how to progressively strength train. We were never taught the benefits that could give us long-term and short-term. And I specifically work with a lot of people who are sort of emerging from motherhood into perimenopause. So have had a lot of patients who have been really blindsided by the fact that they've not been set up for what's coming. So that's why I'm here, and that was so awesome. Thanks for having me.
Let's see if, yes, it totally works. Okay, glad I talked quietly and didn't scare you to death. I've got a bunch of questions that come with the film, and I have a bunch of questions personally, so I could just really sit here with these women all day and ignore all of you. But if anybody's got pressing questions they just want to start with, feel free to shout them out or let me know. I don't want to get past the point you're like, oh, we're not on that particular topic. And I'll just tell you one for me. Just a couple weeks ago, so Leslie and I have been collaborating over this for a while, and I happened to call her and I said, I'm having this really weird day. It has nothing to do with what we're doing at all. But ironically, I went to the dentist. I have fine teeth. They're all here. I floss 2 times a day. Everything's great. They tell me there's nothing we can do. Your tooth has to come out. And I was completely shocked. But apparently, this is part of perimenopause. And I don't know if you heard that statistic on there, but that like a shocking amount of women have to lose a tooth within the first 5 years of menopause. I think I needed some preparation. So I'm curious if any of you had anything that you would like to lead with, but if not, I'm just gonna start at dental. You guys okay? Okay? Well then, can you guys tell us, in your practices and just in the world, because some of you have experienced perimenopause and menopause yourselves, what are some of the things, and they touched on it in the film, and I'm not trying to be negative because I know that I'm trying to look at perimenopause and menopause almost like a metamorphosis. Like we can come out on the other end of it and it can be really positive. And in some ways, at the end of the film, the woman said, I actually feel better than ever. And I think we all want to feel better than ever all the time. But what are some of the things that we can expect that maybe are coming at us a little bit more from left field? So Leslie's the one who was like, oh yeah, this is actually perimenopause related. You're losing your tooth, this happened to me, and if you ask around, you'd be surprised how many people can tell you about their oral surgery. So could you guys talk to me a little bit about what we can expect?
And then you fill in the blanks. Okay, sure. The symptoms and side effects and issues that were brought up was very thorough. The dental one, that was a surprise to me, except for the osteoporosis piece. But I think one that really surprises me often is the joint pain. Because we do affiliate that with aging, inflammation, gut health, things like that, but there's a direct correlation. If you think about what estrogen brings to the table, it brings flow, it brings blood, it brings softness, it brings fluidity. So when we are no longer making estrogen, or our estrogen is taking nosedives throughout the month, we can oftentimes experience those type of issues in the brain. It's not as fluid. In the joints, there's not as much lubrication in the vulvovaginal tissue, and the heart, the cardiac system. So all of those areas, it's very surprising sometimes those symptoms that people experience. Frozen shoulder, that has become kind of a hallmark of perimenopause and menopause for women that experience that. Again, think what's happening. It's a stickiness. It's an inability to move that joint and bring the fluid. So estrogen has, and the other hormones as well, but estrogen in particular is a very lubricating type of hormone for us ladies.
Yeah, and when we were talking, I saw this film about, 3 months ago, and the dental stuff surprised me too, but it didn't, because I had a tooth that I had to pull, and
then several of my girlfriends, the same thing, about the same age, and I was like, oh, so if you start doing the research, it's there, and it has to do with the bone loss, and we just, you know, things change, they shift. You know, and my whole goal is to teach women, like, you know, we can't prevent all of this, but we can definitely support it through hormones, if that's something that's open for you. And then also lifestyle changes, so doing things, so it is a time in life where we have to pay attention to our health a little bit more than maybe we did, because the estrogen and the progesterone really run our lives for so many years, and we have kind of this moment of chaos during perimenopause with our hormones, and our bodies just kind of go, whoa, what's going on? And I always thought that, oh, it's just gonna slowly decline, and I won't really feel anything. That is not what I personally experienced. I had the brain fog stuff. Lisa Mosconi runs a women's health clinic in New York, and I was picked to go and participate in her trial. So she specifically measures how estrogen is metabolized in your brain, and this is her work she's doing. She is the only person on this planet that's doing that work, which is fascinating to me. So, but the research she's finding is our brains are very different than men. We have many more estrogen receptors in our brains because we have more estrogen in our bodies throughout our lives, and as we go through perimenopause, it creates a little bit of chaos in our brains, in our system. So all of this stuff was brand new knowledge to me. I had a frozen shoulder, like I had all the stuff, but I had no idea what to do, how to support it, how to shift. My story is about 2 years ago, I quit my job in pharma of 24 years and just happened to kind of get into a class, and then that pushed me to get certified in menopause coaching. But really, I was just like floored in all of this information that we just aren't taught. It's not shared. I think social media, you know, I think it's a great movement. It's out there. It's kind of being pushed forward. But social media kind of only does so much, and then how do you fill in the pieces, right? So those are the pieces that I try and educate. But I don't want to I would really love for people to ask questions. We can come around with the mic if you don't feel like shouting it, but yes.
This is totally, I guess, kind of left field, maybe not, I don't know. I feel like we hear more and more now about how birth control impacts reproductive systems, and we're just seeing so many different side effects from birth control now. Has there been any research, or have you heard anything of like how taking birth control for a prolonged period can also affect, I don't know, symptoms of menopause or perimenopause?
Yes. It's a loaded question, obviously, as a gynecologist that's, you know, has prescribed. The movement.
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't really hear the question.
The effects of contraception and the potential lifelong changes that can happen in perimenopause.
Yeah,
and the
based
effect
on
it can have.
taking birth
Based on
control.
taking, okay. The main reason that it's an issue and it's controversial is because they haven't figured out a way to give you good estrogen during the time that you're using. You're using synthetic estrogen, which increases risk for breast cancer, heart attacks, and cardiovascular accidents. That's why when they were talking about the old study, they used that type of synthetic conjugated estrogen. You're now using the bioidentical, we're using plant-based, it's yam-based, it's a lot safer and a lot lower dosages. Back in the 70s, and embarrassingly, my teacher at Penn was actually one of the founders or the inventors of the birth control pill. And he talked about how the levels were at about 50 micrograms, and now we're looking at 10 microgram pills available. So you do have that evolution of the pill as being a lot less harmful because of lesser dosage. But what I usually tell my women is I need you off 3 months before we can really look at your cycle and the effects of the hormone on you, and whether or not you are able to regain your cycle back to that. Some women never do because they have actually entered into menopause while they've been on the pill.
Yes.
And it was definitely given out like candy to women going through perimenopause menopause, because it's easy, it's cheap. Here you go, here's the pill, come back and see me when you're 50, 52. And it's been a disservice to women. A great question, and I believe that it does affect the woman in that the emotional piece of the movement through has to be done gradually. So if you give somebody something that's blocking all those sensations and emotions and discussion and basically telling you to just go away until you are no longer having a period, the woman has lost some time of empowerment, and she's lost some ability to ask the questions and to do the work that I'm going to pass the mic to you, and how important it is to do those things that help to support. Because if a woman goes from no hormone, no longer on a birth control pill, they age out at say around 50 because of the risks, the benefits. To me, it's 35, but that's my own thing. I don't think women should be on the pill past 35. Again, that's controversial. So then you're going to withdraw it, and then if she doesn't then jump into hormone therapy, can you imagine what that's going to do for her emotionally, physically, and mentally?
Well, just on that topic, I was just going to say that I've had some patients, I'd say many at this point, who haven't been told that, and so when they do shift the pill, go to an IUD, decide not to take it because they'd like to try to get pregnant, they can be put through some early kind of synthetic menopause. And I'm talking about people who are under 30. So it's how would you know that? You know, you're the patient, it's not up to you to know that this thing you're taking and have been told to take is gonna have this huge effect on you. But it does. And I also work a lot with people who are on hormone replacement therapy for the sake of being trans. And I am like appalled at how much there's no regulation for like, what are your symptoms like now? What is it that you want to experience in your sexual activity? And the only thing I'll just add to the earlier question is that one of the more surprising symptoms that I deal with is vaginal dryness, and just people expect that to be something that's normal, and it affects more than your sexual activity. It affects your comfort, right? So it can also affect incontinence, whether or not you are able to like pee in a normal way. And the feeling I think in the past has always been, well, this is the norm and it's not really changing anything. It's not affecting anyone too negatively. But we're talking about women who literally have to take a change of clothes with them wherever they go and do not leave the house because they're afraid of having an episode. And so, imagine the impact that has on you socially, emotionally, physically, because how are you going to exercise? And so all of those things kind of go together. And the other thing I'll say is we don't really know in perimenopause, I think, how to talk to women about when to know, right? And I think that should be part of the conversation is like, here's how you will know if you are carefully tracking your period, right? And there are many different apps where you can really do this now, taking any and all recommendations because there's a million. There are ways to know when you're sort of experiencing that fluctuation. And even during those periods where you are feeling different symptoms, I work with a lot of high-level athletes who are constantly, they're very tuned into their bodies. They know when they're not functioning well. And even something as simple as saying, okay, when you start to experience heavier flow, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of people think happens in perimenopause, but when you are experiencing heavier flow, it makes sense that you are going to be in an iron deficit. And so why aren't we supplementing with iron? And then people get told how to supplement with iron, maybe, but they don't get told how to do that in a way where the iron is absorbed. And I'm a physical therapist. I'm not even supposed to know that. I know that because I've had to tinker with it myself and with my patients. So those are some of the biggest things that I deal with in the pelvic health realm, just to say that.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Just to follow up on that question and discussion. So are you saying that if someone is on an IUD, they wouldn't even know in perimenopause? And if that's the case, like, how do you find out?
So I'm going to repeat your question just so everybody hears. She asked if someone's using an IUD, could it be possible that they don't even know they're in perimenopause, and when would you even find out? Got it?
Yep.
It depends on the device that you're using, because the progestin only, the Mirenas, they tend to mask if you are not having a period, because some women get a little bit of a period or some spotting, and some women will have a full-blown period. So it really depends on how their body responds to it. There is one type of an IUD called a Paragard that is in place for 10 years. It's a copper base, and you will have a natural period. So in that case, you would be able to track your periods. There are other symptoms that come along besides irregular periods or absence of periods or going long periods of time in between the periods. So I think being tuned into your body, I think is really at the core of that. And again, that's education, that's information, that's helping women to really track and be able to notice that there's some things. An IUD is going to not affect or change brain fog, or even some of those other kind of softer symptoms. Perhaps it might decrease the hot flashes, but for the most part, you need to really have that estrogen and progesterone, which would be in the pill form.
Sharie, could you tell us if that's the case and you don't know, there's other signs to look for, and being self-aware helps. What are some of those signs that we can kind of tune into ourselves?
So the brain fog and the insomnia, difficulty sleeping, changes in mood, reactivity, finding yourself responding or reacting to something quicker, a little quick fuse type of feeling, and a cycle to it. Even if you have an IUD in place, there's still probably going to be a cycle to some of those softer signs that come about. Yeah, joint pain, lack of decreased performance, maybe decreased muscle.
And wait, oh God, is there a way to find out? So say you're on birth control pills, or you have an IUD, and you're starting to have these things, which unfortunately sound also a lot like a woman who's got a job and kids, and these things. Actually, you're describing me possibly for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
So how can you get that diagnosed? How can you go from saying, hey, you know what, I'm just really stressed out and I need a break from these kids and I need a vacation, versus, hi, I'm having a biological change in my body.
Mm-hmm.
How did we find that out?
FSH, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you do the vacation.
Okay. All about that.
And then you can work.
Thank you.
Just go ahead and take the vacation first. Yes, follicle-stimulating hormone, controversial with an IUD. But follicle-stimulating hormone for ladies, probably all of you have had a TSH, thyroid-stimulating hormone, so you kind of know that means that we're checking to see if the thyroid is functioning well. If it's not, then your body does this miraculous, amazing thing and gives you more of the thyroid-stimulating hormone. Same thing with the ovaries. Follicle-stimulating hormone is something that is kind of hitting that ovary to see if it can wake it up a little bit and make you make babies. So the follicle-stimulating hormone will traditionally begin to raise. There's no magic number. Don't let anybody tell you there's a magic number when you are no longer fertile, because oftentimes you'll say, oh, once I hit 50 the number on a follicle-stimulating hormone, that means I don't have to use birth control anymore. It's a conversation that you need to have with a professional.
Can I just say
Yeah.
something with that?
Go ahead.
So I think that's probably the most popular question that I get in my practice is like, well, I went to go see my physician and I said, I have A, B, C, D, literally every symptom in the movie. And do you think I could be in perimenopause? And this is a person who's like 43, right? And they'll just get told like, no, definitely not. Which is, to me, I feel like that's a little bit irresponsible, but that's okay, I get it, because of the lack of education. So what I am often trying to tell my patients is, just so you know, if the average age of menopause is 52, right? And we know that it's gonna last for anywhere from like 6 to 10 years, depending on who you are, and even just what your mother experienced, for instance, then we can reasonably know that at 35 to 45, you are like, if you're a woman, you probably are in perimenopause. It's just that we truly don't have a way of tracking in any kind of, at this point, dependable way to know whether you are. So I feel like a lot of patients are looking for like, well, if I get my blood work done this one time, is that how I'm gonna know? And I just want you to know, that's not how you get to know. And that's not your physician's fault, that's just how it is right now. So hopefully that helps to like clear things up.
Yeah, one of the things that I get asked the most, and I would love to hit that like 35 to 40 age group and just kind of educate them on the symptoms and that type of thing, because it really is a symptom-based diagnosis now. And that right there also, like if you think about it, it's because we haven't spent money, haven't spent the research. There's no tools that doctors have to identify it, so that kind of pisses me off a little bit. But yes, it's symptom-based, and guarantee it's probably somewhere in there, you know, when your period completely stops, you know, that's when, yeah, you're definitely in the later phases. But from my research and things I've done, there's kind of 5 phases of perimenopause. You know, the first one is either a shorter or like a longer time between your periods, and then there's kind of a second phase and a third and a fourth. So there is different kind of sections that most women go through. And then you have those 20% of women who have no symptoms and no issues with perimenopause or menopause. So you kind of, it's very bio-individual is maybe what I'm trying to say, and every woman has a different experience, because if you think about women, you know, on our periods, we also have, like, you can kind of relate it to your period and what you went through in puberty, right? So whatever you know, the research is saying, I'm a researcher, by the way, if you haven't picked up on that, whatever you kind of went through in puberty is maybe what you're gonna go through in perimenopause. There's some similarities, or how intense your periods are. You might have a more intense kind of perimenopause because you're more sensitive to hormones. So, but the thing that really frustrates and sucks for professionals is there's not a lot of tools to give you definite answers other than symptom-based. Yes.
Can you assume if you got your period later in life that menopause would come on later? I didn't think so.
Did everybody hear that?
You want me to talk to you? Can you assume that if you got your period later in life that you would go into perimenopause? Unfortunately, no. There is some research that if you were never pregnant, you actually go into it a little sooner, just based on logistics of how your eggs are. There is some genetic kind of tracking to that, as you saw in the film. But again, there's not kind of a rhyme or reason. And a lot, you know, you can go synthetically into menopause too if you have your ovaries removed, right? Because your ovaries are producing those hormones. Many cancers, if you're on any kind of cancer medication, they will also kind of push you into like a menopausal situation because they may stop your estrogen. So there's other ways to get pushed into menopause. Actually, your friend Molly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Molly, go ahead.
No, you probably know better than I do.
I mean, no.
So you're basically just addressing the different ways that you can experience early onset menopause. And my friend Molly, who is why I'm here today because she couldn't be here, is a breast cancer survivor. And so went to PT school when she was 33 years old as a survivor, which is a really big deal. And anyway, so had to deal with that. I'm actually curious from, if I can, just from the crowd here, if everyone was familiar with the cardiac and osteoporosis risk and just that component of like when you're in perimenopause, it's like you just skyrocket. Is that something that people are aware of? Okay, well, I'm sure you all can chime in.
I have a
Go.
question on that.
Okay.
So a lot of things that I've heard, and I'm not a researcher, again, I'm just on the periphery of this, but I am in perimenopause, so I want to know. A lot of what I've read says that you need to increase your proteins, and a lot of the ways people do that is by eating food, right? We don't want to always be supplementing with protein powders, etc. So if we're having real whole foods, a lot of that
if you're plant-based, that's great. You're gonna be having a lot of beans and eggs. But if you're not and you're eating meats, at what point have you shifted too far into concentrating on your proteins where you're now putting yourself at risk of heart disease? Because as I was watching that, I was like, my proteins are up. And then she was like, your cardiovascular, I'm like, I'm gonna die tomorrow. Because, you're working on one thing, but you're kind of robbing Paul to pay Peter type of thing.
Yeah.
So is there a happy medium? Is there a space where you think like, hey, this is a good protein suggestion, and these are the places to get it without putting yourself in further risk?
Okay. What would you say, actually? I'm
Well,
curious.
that is because you live in that world of
Yeah,
high
yeah.
intensity
Yeah.
athletes, and mine is not so much. So most of my women are just trying to maintain some muscle, and talking to them about protein. The ultra athletes, obviously, that's a different story. But you can overwork on anything, obviously. But the cardiovascular piece is that there is a study that shows that the highest incidence for heart attacks, heart accidents, happen to women between 50 and 60. What happens then? Estrogen drops. I'm sure we're moving away from that statistic because there are so many women on hormone therapy now. And I say that because it's my world. So I saw probably almost 700 patients last year, all of them put them on hormones. So it is definitely the world I live in. And when people come to see me, they come or at least to have the discussion about it. So I know that there's a world outside of that isn't as giving of that resource. So I don't have an answer really when it comes to the increased risk, and it'd be really nice to see some research on that, because we have become protein forward as a society, especially for women. We're banging the drum, everybody on TikTok is talking about how much protein we should be eating. So yes, is there now a correlation, and that would be a good discussion with cardiologists. But I will say that, right, nice mouth. I will say that you will all probably experience the finger pointing about cholesterol in middle age if you're not using any hormone therapy, because the hormones, the sex hormones, they mentioned that the hormones that make up the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone in all of our bodies, which I know you're all going to have questions about testosterone, and we'll talk about that. They are all made from cholesterol. So the hierarchy of manufacturing in the body through the liver is cholesterol, progesterone, pentagonal, DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So if our body becomes deficient in that because our ovaries are no longer making it, or we're running off the rails and not making any good testosterone because of our adrenal health, so the body goes, oh wait, I gotta make some more cholesterol. So that's where some of that myth comes in, that middle age and higher cholesterol, it may be a compensatory way that our body's protecting itself. So you want to speak on that?
No, I completely agree, and it's like so refreshing to hear a physician say that. But yes, to your question, so from an athletic perspective, for all of my athletes, 0.7 per gram of lean body mass, 0.7 to 1 gram. So if you are a 135 pound person, that means you're gonna wanna be shooting for something like 115, 105 to 135 grams of protein. And I feel like the biggest issue with that is that that's a lot more than most women are eating. So am I out there with a little pen tracking it, all of that? No, I'm not, because some of my athletes are competing at a national level, and some of my athletes are like nursing a baby and trying to figure out how to get more than like 2 hours of sleep. So I'm all about survival, and really what I think it comes down to is your health is not just ticking off 10s for all boxes. Your health is a matter of like raising the floor in as many levels as you can, and also trying not to stress too much about it, because that actually makes everything worse, right? So I think getting protein in any format is fantastic. The hill that I want to die on is that many women do not know what it means to strength train. And the hard part about something like osteopenia is you can't just take vitamin D. You can't just eat calcium. you have to incur a stimulus on your body that actually inspires that bone growth. And there is some really fascinating research about this, but ultimately what we know is you have to lift to basically almost failure. You don't have to like keel over and die trying to squat with a dumbbell, but you should be like, I don't want to talk to you because I need to think right now, because I need to think about surviving standing up from this squat. Anything less than that does not create bone density, and it just doesn't. And I would love to be somebody who's like, just go to Pilates, just go to yoga. I have no problem with either of those things, but if you are someone who is 35, I want you to know that as soon as you hit that age, you have to work twice as hard, even just to retain the muscle that you do have. That's how bad it is. And that's why 1 in 3 women are gonna have osteoporosis. And there is also hopping and jumping. Those are things that women stop doing, right? Because we're about to pee, okay? It doesn't need to be like that. I'm here to tell you, sex does not have to be painful. You do not have to be weak, and you can actually run after your kids and grandkids. That's the way it should be, but we are not educated and told how to do these things, and we're told that we are women, and so we shouldn't be doing all of these things, which is even worse. So that's my opinion. And if you want to be able to build those things, I mean, I do have a conversation occasionally with a patient where I'll be like, we are hitting this protein wall. Like, you are not recovering in a way that I typically see. And often it's with many of my endurance athletes. So people who are just like, I love to be on a treadmill for like an hour every, whole other issue. But like, these are the people that I'm like, okay, we really need to talk and we need to track what we're actually eating.
On that note, I do kind of high-level coaching with women utilizing something called a Dutch test. If any of you ever had it or had questions on it, I can speak on that a little bit more deeply. But it looks really deeply at the metabolism of the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone through the body. So it allows me to really coach to that place of what's going on with your cortisol. Are you sleeping well? What's happening? The Dutch test results do not lie. We pick up sometimes sleep apnea, picked up some kind of bizarre nighttime routines by looking at what cortisol levels look like, or even morning routines. So to that, you're really able to ratchet down into, I always have my clients give me a food journal, a sleep journal, and a movement journal. And what comes out of that stuff, she could be a rock star with her eating. She's nailing that 1,600 calories she's getting, her protein, her macros, everything looks perfect. And then we looked at her sleep, and she was doing great, 6:30 in the morning, going to sleep 10:30, getting a good night's sleep, taking a nap every day, which I said, this is really cool. She did an hour nap every day. And we talked about that as being her meditation time or quiet time. It wasn't sleeping per se, but that was what she carved out. But then when we got to her movement, I realized that was the problem. And that was way over exercising. And gave her permission to step back for 2 of the days of the week. And she could still do movement. I still wanted her to be moving. But we added 2 days of heavy weight training, which would compensate for some of the intense kind of need for her to expel energy, which she was doing an hour on the treadmill. There comes a point of no return, and you can speak to this more than I can. I think it's around 20, 25 minutes, where you are really no longer you're really no longer benefiting. The calorie engine turns off because the cortisol engine turns on. And when that happens, that's belly fat, that's blood sugar dysregulation, and it really, maybe you're getting something out of it because you need that hour of intense, hitting the dopamine receptors. Well, I'd like you to be hitting dopamine receptors with a barbell. So that's kind of one of the movements that I've worked with my patients. And then I really want a quiet movement. The Pilates, if it's not intense. Yoga, if it's not intense and hot yoga. Which I'm a yoga teacher, so I have my bias. When it becomes a fitness class, you're no longer getting that quiet movement, and really what we're talking about, being able to have that space where we can kind of bring everything down a little bit and still move and still have your time carved out, but we're definitely moving, unless you're ultra athlete and you're looking for performance, obviously, you can't slap off from that, but the average woman, I want them weight training. Slab of muscle. It's biologically more stable, it's improving your blood sugar, it's hitting endorphins, it's improving your brain function, you'll sleep like a baby, and you're probably gonna wanna make love more.
Yeah, it's fascinating because during this time too, I mean, how many women put on the extra, right, like the extra middle, and there's a reason why, but me, myself included, you know, been an athlete for many years, and I like all of a sudden put on 20, 25 pounds, I was like, and what that did for me was like, oh, I need to work harder. I need to run, I need to go to, you know, I didn't really go to the gym, but I need to run harder, I need to do another day. And nothing changed, and so I think that is really telling too, because exactly what she said is the only thing you're doing is you're increasing your cortisol. Because there comes a point in our bodies and in our life when our system needs to shift. I'm all about, like, we were here, you kind of got to go here, but nobody really explains why. So I'm going to stop and, yeah,
No,
go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to say I really, really, really appreciate all of you being here. This is incredible, and we all need to be talking about it. And I want you to keep talking, so can I go get you water?
That is so nice,
Yeah.
thank you.
I was just thinking my mouth was getting
But for me,
Like 3
yeah,
times
so
a
for
day or
me, the
something.
journey has been going and lifting weights too. And I started doing it on my own. And what I can tell you is that what I learned is that find somebody who can help you on that journey, because most of the women in here probably don't do strength training. And you get someone to help you get a routine going, understand what it means to go to failure, because it is very important to do that, because you're not only hitting your muscle, but what supports your muscle? Your bones. So you're strengthening your bones. Your muscle also helps with your metabolism. It's just like it's an overall, and the brain stuff is fascinating, because if you think about, like, you're concentrating, you're changing your brain, you're making your brain work in a different way. You're learning something new, right? That's the big thing. Like, we also have a spirituality shift during this point, because our brain, like Lisa Mosconi said, goes through a transformation, and we kind of get rid of all the other bullshit, and it becomes more about us. We kind of shift inward. It's a time when women start doing new things. It's the most time when women start a different career, a second career, because we stop worrying about others. And if you're into like a yin yang, we become a little bit more yangish. We become a little bit more about us, because we don't have all these things to take care of anymore. So I think the strength training thing is, it comes up again and again, and I think it's an easy way to shift your world a little bit. And the food is just really tough. I think food is just, it's a hard thing to talk about, and I do agree with you. Like, okay, well now is my cholesterol through the roof because I'm eating bacon 5 times a day. But I think we're all smart enough to know that there's other ways to get protein. And I think you just have to do things in moderation and do small shifts. We don't all have to go crazy overnight, but just little, and notice, and it's gonna take longer. I'm sorry, we're not in our 30s and our 40s anymore. It's gonna take a little bit longer and more diligent to make those shifts. So questions?
This is for women with hysterectomy. You know, being on estrogen and testosterone, but it used to be that if you had no uterus, you didn't need progesterone. But now they're having more articles out there that say yes. So just want to see what your take was on that.
Yeah, great question. I've been prescribing progesterone the past 10 years. It just happened to have really good mentors. And I had to fight a little bit with that in the mainstream medicine. I'm noticing actually one of the oncogynecologists that I send patients to, she sends them back to me, and she'll always put a little note on the bottom knowing that what I do, and she'll say it's okay when we start hormones. So she's actually been prescribing the progesterone as well. The main reason for that because progesterone works together with estrogen to create your cycle, to balance everything out in pregnancy, to start your cycle. The two work together. Why would we not continue to let them work together? They also help improve bone health when they're synergistically given. And progesterone puts the brakes on. There's receptors in the uterine lining for progesterone and estrogen. So the idea was, you don't have a uterus, you don't need the progesterone. But we also have breast tissue that takes up estrogen and progesterone. So that's a great question. That's why I have my patients on both. I think they work synergistically together, and I think more and more information is coming out that the two should be given together. And the progesterone is different than progestin, which is in the birth control pill. So that's inflammatory, whereas the progesterone is the plant-based biotin.
Are you talking about a cardiac zone? Yeah. Okay, because everyone's into the zones. Okay, yes. So I'm a big advocate for learning from someone, but there's also so many resources out there. So I know that that's both helpful and hurtful sometimes. So at a minimum, I do prefer, and the research shows that 2 times a week is plenty. And as far as time goes, it kind of depends. I have people who will do good strength training for like little 30-minute sessions, and they get stronger every week. That's maybe doing a lower body movement and an upper body movement, because the thing is, you don't just need one. You need both, and for your whole body. And so my recommendation would be to try, if you can, to find someone who you look at what they do and you see that they're being very intentional, or if you have a friend who can say, hey, I started out doing some workout with 15 pounds and now I'm doing it with a barbell and it's 45 pounds or more. That's really what you want to be able to see if you are training maximally. You should see progression. So it shouldn't just be, and this is honestly what I see more when people come to me with this question is they're like, well, I've been doing the same workout for 40 years and I use these 10-pound dumbbells, so I'm definitely strength training. And my question to them is like, well, did you ever get stronger? And if you can't tell me you did because you don't have a number to say that, then you aren't really doing strength training. Going to failure is a skill, and it's one of the reasons why the best way to begin is just to find someone who you can really trust to get you from nothing at all to something. If you do look on that page, my Instagram, I'd be happy to recommend someone like personally for you, or even just like a program, because there's plenty of people who come to me and they're looking for that, but I can't, they can't afford to come to me or they're not in Philly. And I have plenty of people that I know about, or programs online that are very easy to follow, because there's definitely a lot of stuff you don't need to be doing, and I don't want you to do that because it's a waste of time. As far as zones go, I'm a big fan of kind of a similar sort of balance, like a baseline for health, 2 times a week strength training, and then walking in a zone that's kind of like calm, or doing yoga or doing something like that that kind of assists with your mental health as well. I also taught mindfulness for a little bit of time. Any kind of activity where you're able to breathe in that zone 2 range that everyone is obsessed with, that's a good activity. And there's good research to show that if you're even just getting your heart rate up 3 times a week for 30 minutes, you leap exponentially above people who are not doing that as far as like systemic disease goes. And I would remind you that when you're strength training, your total heart rate is going to be elevated for however long you're doing that. So you can completely count that as a breathing session if you're doing it correctly. Hope that helps.
Thank you for doing this. So I had a question about the risks with hormone therapy.
My mom did have breast cancer, and so I've kind of heard, and I don't know if it's true, which is why I'm asking the question, that I have to be careful with something like that. And then, if that is not for me, what are the natural things that we can do other than obviously strength training, our protein, you know, any other little tidbits on natural ways that we can help with the symptoms that we're experiencing?
You can take the Yes. I'm a big fan and because it's covered by insurance, and there's a lot of really good genetic counselors out there, to really have that conversation within a family, have that conversation with whoever you're going to ask these questions to, probably a healthcare provider, and find out what type of cancer it was. Is it more than just one relative in the family? So genetic counselors are very good at sifting out that information of whether or not you're at risk genetically. I think that piece of genetics that BRCA's 1, 2, if any of you are familiar with that term, and there's a lot of other markers now that are coming up. But a general family member that it occurred later in life, Aunt Sally on mom's side, we don't see an increased risk with the use of hormone therapy. If it's done in a way that's bioidentical, that's done in a way transdermal, through the skin, and that it is done carefully with blood work and monitoring. Start low, go slow, that type of philosophy. So it depends. It's a nuanced conversation that I think is between you and the provider that would be able to look back at records and, you have a conversation with family members and have that piece of, was this a estrogen or progesterone driven hormone-based problem? Almost everyone knows that now as we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in diagnosis, but also the trends in a family and whether or not genetic testing would be a good idea. And then you'd like to address some of the things you can do other than medication.
Yeah, other than medication, so we talked about food, so I think, and the whole thing behind protein is as we age, our protein that we ingest just isn't as bioavailable as it was before, so it's really helping, and if you are gonna do that strength training stuff, that protein becomes very important to kind of feed your muscles. I can say creatine too is something that's being right now kind of proven as a very safe, easy supplement. So creatine in our bodies naturally is only made in our brains, but as we age, we kind of lose, again, the bioavailability of those amino acids. So adding that on, if you're gonna start doing some kind of training, the walking is a great, fast walking, because who wants to run anymore, right? So the other thing I think from a lifestyle perspective is it's also very important, not what you eat, but maybe when you eat. So some intermittent fasting might help with your energy, with kind of your brain stuff. There's, I think another pillar is sleep. So really looking at your sleep hygiene, how that can shift, what you can do to change that. Any kind of, connection you can make with other women right now, although a lot of me sometimes just wants to hang out on the couch. But I think you have to kind of force yourself into conversation with other women, getting out there even though you don't feel like it. That connection piece during this time is huge. And just having these conversations with other women and opening up that dialogue, that empowerment with each other, right? Or shifting with another girlfriend. Like my girlfriend's here, and we've tried a bunch of stuff together, and it's nice to have a partner to do those things with, right? Because it's companionship, and you can talk, oh, well, that really didn't work for me, did it work for you, right? So lifestyle changes, and I know that, and there's supplements and there's vitamins and things that you can do just to kind of help you support through that period of time. So I don't know if that was helpful or.
Yes.
So I touched on the rise in iron levels that can potentially happen when you're in perimenopause, but the opposite thing happens when you're in menopause, and I think you would know more about that, but I've had patients who have had to go and kind of handle the too much iron problem, which creates symptoms of menopause as well. And then I think it's not talked about a lot because you know, a glass of wine is a really lovely thing, but alcohol is a huge part of any of the things we've talked about that you don't want to have, essentially. And again, not fun to talk about, but I think for people that are really looking to minimize risk, right now I wish I had it in front of me. I know it's somewhere in my phone, and I'll try to find it and post it for y'all. But there's a list of like all the different things and how many more years of life you're going to get relative to a number of different activities that you do or do not do. And at the top of your loss is really alcohol intake of something like 6 drinks a week. So it's not even really that much. So I'm just off the cuff right now, but I'll try to find it. And all I can tell you is it's in there. I wish it wasn't, but it is.
So I cannot take hormones due to estrogen-positive breast cancer. And I'm wondering if there's a resource, I don't need answers per se, but if there's resources that you recommend for the supplements. You know, I could do all these lifestyle changes, but I feel like, you know, the answer is HRT for everybody but me. And I'm, you know, trying to talk about it and normalize the conversation, but I just feel like there's nothing for me. And I'm wondering if you have anything that you know, someplace that you could point me to look.
It's coming.
I believe that,
It's
but
coming. It truly is coming.
I'm 62 and I'm worried I'm going to miss the mark.
There are some amazing researchers, pharmacists, physicians. I go every year to conferences, and those thought leaders and heroes are out there fighting. And there are a few doctors, and I can give you those.
I know
privately.
you have, and I'm looking into them. But
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, if there's supplements or there's more natural things
Food?
in addition to the lifestyle changes.
Yes,
Yes,
there are,
Yeah.
absolutely. Kava, Kava has, or no, it's not Kava, oh my gosh, it just, feminescence is, yeah, and I take hormones. There's no excuse for this. Gosh, I can't think of the name of it. And the company is Feminescence.
Okay.
It's a new company, I like what they're doing, and why can I not remember the word? Kava, it's another root.
Oh, it's the Yale group thing, right?
Is it maca?
Oh yeah.
I don't
Thank
know.
you.
Is it maca?
I just heard it,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes, so they have been utilizing that for symptoms. And ashwagandha is always,
I know you told me that, yeah.
that's usually very, very good for calming. But again, it's a conversation, because if you throw out a list and that person isn't experiencing that, we haven't even touched on libido and sexual health and intimacy, but there's a whole group of medication depending on what the person's needs are. Is it an orgasm issue? Is it libido issue? Is it stress issue? And you would tailor it much like you would have that conversation. So it is important to have certain markers, your vitamin D and your magnesium, and the typical things that most postmenopausal women need. But that little bit more fine-tuned conversation. But to go back to the conversation, I know you and I've had this conversation, that there are some doctors who are starting to look at that 5-year mark out from breast cancer and potentially restarting back to chemotherapy, because the benefits outweigh the risks. It's cutting edge, it's a little controversial. I certainly it wouldn't be in my wheelhouse to do that. But I do know that there are some doctors that are moving that direction and that thought, because there is a huge population of women that are in your shoes. You're not alone.
Right.
And it is being worked on, and it is being talked about.
It's more for me the preventive benefits of hormones, the brain and all of that, that's the thing that worries me.
Understand.
Yeah, so,
So
okay.
the muscle stuff, that's getting into your, there are things, I think, that, and if you want, I can go through supplements that, and make sure you're doing some of those things, but, there are things, and HRT, like, I think it was in the film, like, during, when we have our periods, our estrogen and progesterone are here, and what we're getting is like, here, I mean, it is protective, but it's not, all these other things support, like, you can't just take hormones.
Right.
You've
Right.
got to do everything else
Right.
to support all of that and maximize what's going on.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, like our medical, like how we've been taught, and oh, just take this pill and you'll be fine. And I don't think that's not what hormones are gonna do.
No, I do all those
Yeah,
the things.
so that's awesome.
But it's, I sort of feel like there's so much hormone replacement,
Yeah.
and I keep thinking, well, why is it touted as like the answer?
Which it shouldn't be.
Exactly. It's but it's an
It's a part of
education
the
for the people
equation,
who,
yeah.
the perimenopause people who we want to know about it. But at the same time, it's like, it's just like, it's the answer.
No, and actually, like most of all my workshops, I talk about it this much.
Yeah.
Because I think all those other things are so much more important. And look at all these women who are in their 80s and their 90s and thriving, and they've probably never. So
Right, they went
there's
on.
ways to do
Yeah.
it, and I think, well, why wouldn't you? Because that's amazing. I mean, men are on Viagra like that, and we're just like, oh, should we do that?
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's awesome that we have that availability to give to women, and it's part
Right.
of. And we should look at it. We should go through whatever we need to do. But there's other ways.
Yeah.
I think to get where you need to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there was ever a time for personal responsibility for us ladies, it's now. It truly is. The medical system's broken, and I could go on a soapbox on that rant for quite a while.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutical companies, it is our responsibility. And I think also it's a responsibility as women to heal the earth.
Absolutely.
In that pathway. And we need you. We need this army out here. We truly do. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I'm not retiring at this old age. I should be riding off into the sunset, but I can't, because I need to shift gears from the medical model that I've been part of and carved out within that medical model to my own health, my own reputation, to, you know, just about being pushed out the door many times. But I didn't feel ready, but it's ready because of something like this coming together. Because I know that that voice can be heard very loudly because all of you are supporting that. And there's a lot of people with brilliant minds that are out there working hard for all of you and giving you the information, but it's going to be our responsibility to gather that information and individualize it. Yes, you'll need coaches, you'll need consultants, you'll need people that are gonna help guide you, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be your choice because it's your body and it's the way that you're gonna respond to different things. I've started hormones on people and they'll come back for 2-3 months later and they're like, I have really different. So you didn't make any changes. There was nothing changed for you. And that's not the magic answer. It might be a tool in your toolbox, but it's not the magic answer. And that's why it's just such a piece.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sharie, are you still going to be available for us for our therapy?
Not at Axia. As of March
Okay,
27th.
but you're still an option for us.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be doing some different things. I don't know about the prescribing part. Yeah. 27.
I just have a quick question with her concern with breast cancer receptor. So bioidentical HRT is